Good morning. It's currently 6:24 a.m. on Wednesday, May 20th, 2015. I'm Christiana Ellis and I just got up. This is 5 more minutes. Today, I'm going to geek out all about the season finale of The Flash, the TV show. So, if you have not watched it yet, my review is that it's very good. I liked it a lot. Now there will be spoilers. You have been warned. So, whoa, right? Like, I'm assuming that you've also seen it now. That was pretty amazing as an hour of TV. Now, The Flash as a TV show, as season 1 has progressed, has been a favorite. It's definitely been one of the shows that I always want to watch almost immediately. If not live, then it's, first on the list of whatever I've got on the DVR. I had some complaints as the season progressed, in particular its treatment of Iris and her becoming a character that I can understand why she bothers people, but I feel like it's not the character's fault, it's the fact that the show doesn't give the character anything interesting to do. The idea of being the character who's the only one on the show who doesn't know the big secret is kind of an awful place to be in. So, I'm glad they finally resolved that. But there was stuff for all of the main cast to do. Exciting things going on, all sorts of interesting, weird little nods. Some huge scale, some great sci-fi time travel ethical dilemmas, and then all rushing through at a breakneck pace, which is as only can be expected from a show about the Flash. Let's see. We've got great stuff from Cisco, not only in terms of... so first, let me just talk about, we've got the central dilemma that Barry faces, which is amazing, which is this idea that he has the opportunity to travel back in time and save his mother from getting killed, which happened 15 years ago. But that's going to change the timeline that he knows now. 15 years worth. That seems like a big deal. And you have to say, well, okay, let's say, even if you have some clues as to what that timeline would have been like, for example, the only reason it happened in the first place is because, Eobard Thawne, who was posing as Harrison Wells, he already fought the Flash and came back to kill him and then killed Barry's mother instead, which is what led to the timeline that we know now. So you could argue that the way things are now, our current timeline, is not actually what's supposed to happen, but it itself is the altered timeline after the Reverse Flash came back and altered it. And so in that context, you could argue that going back to save Barry's mom is actually just putting it back the way things are, quote, supposed to be, depending on various definitions of what supposed to means. But just this idea of Barry suffering this real dilemma of like his mom dying and then his father getting sent to prison was such a traumatic thing for him. And the idea that he could save her, like, he's a hero at heart. He wants to save people. But he also knows that he loves Iris and he loves Joe. And he loves being the Flash, working with Caitlin and with Cisco, and who knows what of that would be preserved. Almost certainly he wouldn't go live with Joe, because why would he? If his parents are okay, so why would he go to live with Joe? And so he feels like he would be losing that relationship. But then you also have to say, but then he would have his mom, and he would be out there in the world with his dad instead of his dad having to be in prison. And I love the dilemma of that. I thought that was really great, and I'm glad that the show really took its time to wrestle with that and to have each of the characters kind of weigh in, even though some of them are, kind of hesitant. They feel like it's maybe not their place, and yet all of them have to know. It's like, well, but what's going to happen to me if they put that timeline back the other way? And knowing that you won't ever know the difference doesn't make that easier to contemplate. Oh, it's so great. So great. Okay, and I'm already over 5 minutes. So anyway, I love the dilemma of that and how it's resolved, even though it happens very quickly. The idea that after all of that, he finally goes back to do it, and just at the very moment when he would have done it, he sees his other self warn him away. And then has to stand by and listen while his mom gets stabbed. But then he does get to have a final moment with her. He gets to say goodbye. He gets to tell her that he and his dad are going to be okay. And she gets to be proud of him. And I'm tearing up just talking about it now. Oh my God, it was so great. We also got great stuff with Reverse Flash in terms of what he wants, the offer he's making, the idea that, he just wants to go back to his time. Of course, you could very well ask the question of like, well, first of all, you're a murderer, why should we give you what you want? But also just the idea of like, well, if you just put the timeline back the way it was, that was the timeline that made him come back to try to kill Barry as a kid in the first place. So not obvious there. But like at the same time, this is comic book time travel. I think, we can work with that. And that's why also, okay, let me try to do this in order. Caitlin gets to get married to Ronnie. Yay! Ronnie is still kind of a weird, almost non-character for me. I think it's partly just because like 2/3 of the time we've seen him, he was like weirded out and not acting like himself. I don't think that's the actor's fault. It's just kind of, that's a strange character to try to play. Professor Stein at least gets to be a little bit more of a character. He distinguishes himself a bit more just by virtue of being something other than a generic guy. So Caitlin gets to get married, so that's nice. Professor Stein gets to have the moment with Eddie, the big moment, and that whole plot line of, everything leading up to Eddie and his sacrifice. I have to admit that, like, even though there was a part of me that kind of, even before the big sacrifice moment, part of me that just kind of wondered, it's like, so Eddie, you could just go get a vasectomy? But at the same time, when his actual moment of sacrifice came, I was really moved there too. It's like, he wasn't going to do it, but when it came down to like, this is a world-ending threat, like, he got to be Iris's hero, just like that's what he always wanted. It's like, oh, my mom, Eddie! I really like the show's handling of Eddie just because so often in lesser shows, the romantic rival is made into a jerk because we all want to hate the guy that is trying to get your girl. And yet that always has seemed like a disservice to me of multiple characters. First of all, like, well, does he need to be a jerk? Like, why does the girl like him if he's a jerk? And so in this context, he's not a jerk. He's not, and he's very reasonable, and he's been very understanding under some very weird circumstances, and now he's made this great heroic sacrifice. We got Cisco get to confront Reverse Flash about killing him in the alternate timeline, which was great, letting him really feel like and get some catharsis and discover that, oh, hey, there's a reason that you remember this alternate timeline. It's because you're actually a metahuman too. What? Actually, it's true that his Cisco's name is the name of an existing DC Comics character, which I had known at one point but kind of forgotten. And so I'm sure that this is potentially leading back into that. That's also true for Caitlin, by the way, although there's been no clue so far that they're doing anything with that yet. But in any case, this, so that was a great moment. And plus, Cisco also got to got to have that great exchange of like, no way, I'm going to help you kill yourself. Help you get yourself killed. It's like, well, Cisco, I need you to build a time machine. And he's like, I'm listening. So great. And then you got Joe getting some great stuff with getting to be, at first the one to say, no, you definitely need to do it. But then later to kind of admit, like, I don't know, I'm scared too. But this is such a big decision for you that I didn't want you to do it. I didn't want you to decide not to do it because you were worried about me. And I liked that a lot too. And, the Reverse Flash was, had some great stuff. He got to kind of reiterate some of what he said, in a couple previous episodes of saying, like, I hated the grown-up Flash that I fought against. And now, I came back to do this, but now that I've actually been working with you, there's a conflict there because as much as I hate your grown-up version, I really kind of even love your younger version, and that's conflicting. And so I thought that was great too. Iris, I'm trying to remember if we got a lot from Iris other than her interactions with Eddie. I feel like she didn't talk with Barry very much in this episode. Maybe I'm just remembering. So much was going on. In any case, yeah, so I think she maybe didn't get she got her big moments with Eddie, being able to take him back. And that works too because I kind of liked how she had handled him breaking it off with her in the previous episode. And so getting to complete that loop felt good, even if she didn't necessarily have a lot of other stuff going on. She did, I guess, she was encouraging for Barry as he's preparing to go on his trip. And then so we also got some nice detail with some of the visions that Barry saw in the Speed Force, or actually I think clips of the upcoming Legends of Tomorrow spin-off show, which I became tons more interested in when I realized that was going to have time travel in it too. Okay, so much. The helmet that gets spit out of the wormhole indicates to me that we're possibly looking at some multiverse sort of stuff leading into the next season. Anyone who didn't recognize it, the helmet, the sort of saucer-shaped helmet with the little wings on it. It's in the style of the helmet that the Greek god Mercury supposedly wore, but it's also a different incarnation of the Flash wore that helmet in the comics, and so that's something that's probably gonna be a nice nod to stuff happening in the future, or in the future of the show. I mean, season 2. Okay, and then actually finishing with Barry's gonna outrun a freaking black hole. It's just so comic booky and ridiculous. It's such a goofy thing sometimes with a character where his power is super speed, so that they have to just come up with a reason that running is going to be able to stop any particular threat. Which don't get me wrong, it's goofy, but in such a fun comic booky way. And I thought the effects were on point, and leaving it on a big cliffhanger. I'm actually generally not a super fan of big cliffhangers like that. I kind of like to get some level of closure usually, but I'll give this one a pass because it did feature Barry running up the side of a skyscraper, then hopping from one piece of debris to another in order to run around the event horizon of a black hole. Note to future showrunners, if you do that, I will forgive you cliffhangers. All right, so that was a pretty great season finale for The Flash. Good job. All right, I think that's probably it for today. By the time this time tomorrow, I'm going to be in the process of getting packed for Balticon, which is going to be exciting. But in the meantime, I will talk to you tomorrow for 5 more minutes.